In the autumn of 1899, Sir Herbert Beerbohm Tree, who was a great actor-manager in London, was producing a new production of Shakespeare's King John. And one day he took some of his cast, in full costume, out of Her Majesty's Theatre at the bottom of Haymarket, round the corner from Trafalgar Square in the centre of London, and they walked across Trafalgar Square and down to the embankment by the Thames, and they were filmed. Tree chose some extracts from the play, and they performed them in front of hastily, temporarily erected sets, and for the first time that we know of, Shakespeare was on film. The bit that survives is of Tree emoting furiously in the death scene of King John, while three actors standing around as extras barely move as he takes very much centre stage, or should I say centre screen. But before too long, Shakespeare becomes a regular part of the whole film industry. Not only in what we might think of as straight versions, a version of Richard III that is actually the earliest surviving full-length American feature film, running about 70 minutes, but also adaptations, astonishing adaptations, like a very beautiful Chinese silent film called A Spray of Plum Blossoms, which is based actually on Shakespeare's Two Gentlemen of Verona, or a wonderful film directed by Sven Garda, a version of Hamlet in which Hamlet is played by a woman, because in this version Hamlet is a woman, played by Asta Nielsen, with astonishing eye makeup that makes her dark eyes pierce across the screen, and which reconstructs the long narrative in terms of politics and desire in ways that nobody could ever have anticipated working on film. Across the years, there's been both the fascination by major and minor studios, independent filmmakers and whoever, with the possibility of doing Shakespeare, if you like, straight. I think in the 30s of Warner Brothers, creating their version of A Midsummer Night's Dream with pretty much all of Mendelssohn's music and about a third to a half of Shakespeare's text, and using all the stars that the studio had under contract, including new actress Olivia de Havilland, who is introduced in the film, and with James Cagney, not best known as a Shakespeare actor, playing Bottom, Mickey Rooney as Park, and all the spectacle that the Austrian theatre director Max Reinhardt could add to the setting on a vast soundstage. Every so often then, the movies have returned to doing Shakespeare straight, trying to capture something about classic Shakespeare and see what they could make of it. I think, because they're movies I grew up with, of Olivier's three great Shakespeare movies, Henry V, Hamlet, and Richard III. Films that are very consciously playing Shakespeare, I suppose, as at that point it felt right to play them. And then there are the moments when a new audience is to be introduced to Shakespeare. Zeffirelli finding a whole youth culture that could respond to Romeo and Juliet, or Baz Luhrmann 30 years later doing more or less the same discovery of a young person audience, a new demographic for Shakespeare on film, in his film William Shakespeare's Romeo plus Juliet, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes. Sometimes the film industry finds in Shakespeare's narratives the possibility of a whole new subgenre of films, like 10 Things I Hate About You, based on Taming of the Shrew, the only Shakespeare movie to spawn its own TV series, or She's the Man, or Get Over It, high school comedies. Part of that great genre of American high school movies, but making the Shakespeare narrative buried within it, sometimes visible, sometimes not, sometimes foregrounding the Shakespeare, sometimes in effect disguising it, or finding darker tones, like the movie O, which turns Othello into a high school tragedy, or Scotland, PA, which makes Macbeth a narrative about the fast food industry, the McDonaldization in which the Macbeths create the Macbeth burger. The industry doesn't stop. As I record this, I'm waiting eagerly for the new Macbeth, starring Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard, and a version of Cymbeline. Well, who would have thought that Cymbeline would be the subject for a good movie in our current climate? but this one reset in an upstate New York wasteland of deserted strip malls with biker gangs and drug lords as the subject of the film. Shakespeare is the gift that keeps on giving. There is always a way of remaking Shakespeare for a brand new cinema audience.